So let's complete 6.1. So where we're at right now, and I've cleared my local storage, and I'm going to enter some data rather than just to hit defaults. So what we have now is we have some data. The data that we have in the table itself is in the format that we stored it in local storage and in our object. So this is what we might refer to as more database, more machine formatted. And really what we want to do here is we want to format this to where it's more user friendly. So we're going to do some reformatting to this to make it a little more friendly, honestly, because people would look at this and some of this would be okay, right? But what happens if we do apartment size, right? So as an example, if we do apartment size, we know even without clearing the form, what will happen there. And we're actually starting to also get some interesting output because even though I've only hit submit twice, I'm getting 3, and we'll handle that on 6 too. So, but even on this last one that was just here, it still didn't output apartment. It still gave me the home size, right? So in that case, we need to account for that reality that somebody did that. And then in the diet type and then in the fresh as well. So let's write a few more helper functions to do this. So we'll start with just above where we're going to do is to, and I've already included mine, which is right under our DOM references. We're going to write our helper functions here. So we'll start with the one at the top, the timestamp. So we're going to kind of reverse what we did when we stored it. So, and in this case, we'll explain it as we go, okay? So what we're going to do is create another function. This function is going to be format date, okay, for display. Because again, humans like to see this a little nicer because sometimes we see things and it doesn't quite make sense, so we like to make it easy. Now we're going to pass timestamp to it, okay? And I'll show you how we're going to call this in a minute. So before, when we did date now, okay, now we're going to do const. We're going to set up a local variable. We're going to say new date. And this time, because we have the timestamp, we can pass the timestamp to that method. Okay? And we can see what we're going to get back just by here. Right? As a matter of fact, well, actually I can't unless I have called it. So actually that wouldn't hurt. Let's go ahead and do that. So down here, we're not done with this yet. But down in here then, and this is one of the nice things about template strings, is that we can just call functions from here. So I could say format display and then put parentheses around this to then inside of here when the value that will be presented between the TDs will be as a result of running this, which automatically should tell you we're going to have to return something here. Okay? But just to see this in play now, let's come over here, go to our sources, go to our handler, our renderer. Oh, let's get a fresh copy of it. Oh, looks like I need to restart my live server. Okay, there we go. 6, there we go. Okay, so sources down here. Okay, so on my calculate, okay, when I run this line, if I roll back up, I can see now this is an object, and that's what calling new date and passing it the timestamp that we have, it takes this and it creates an object from this. And that is stored in date. Now, why do we want to do that? Because now we can tell it, we can give it very specific rules about how we want it formatted. Okay, and this is what's nice about doing this. So we're actually going to return what we're about to write. So we're going to say date dot to locale string. Now, to date locale date string. So it's going to basically say, hey, take this object and now run this to locale date string method on it. I know it's a long name. And first we're going to tell it we want this in English, okay? Because different countries have different English US in this case, right? So just doing this will give us a certain that is specific to the United States format of the way we like to see dates. But there's actually even more specifics we're going to give it, because what we can do here is do a comma, very much like when we call functions and we pass multiple arguments that become parameters. We can do the same thing when we're calling methods. So in this case, we're going to pass it an object. Now, why are we passing an object? Because we can give it that key value pair to be specific about how we want it to come back. We're going to say, hey, give me the year and give me it numeric. Okay, give me the month and give it to me in a short format. Give me the day and give it to me numeric. Okay. Oh, I didn't. Evidently it didn't. Oh, that's because of the way I did it. So you have to do a string numeric. Okay. So once I've done that, then it's going to return it. It's going to convert it to an object. It's going to call the to locale date string. It's going to make it a US formatted, and then it's going to be specific, because even within just the US format standard is we then have people, and you see this all the time, people format dates differently, right? And when we came down here, well, let's go ahead and let this run this to see it. Ooh. Oh, that's because I don't have it in there yet. Okay, let's try this again, because in my data, I should have it just fine. Let's see if this does return. Oh, no, I did call it. Okay, let's see if it runs. Let's see if I forgot something in here. Good. Now let's see here if it passes it back. Oh, that's right. It's building the string. We could look here and find out. Oh, good. So now you can see it down here. So this is, right, so we are very specific about the way we want the date. So that's nice. That's a nice helper function to, and we'll just go ahead and let this run. Okay? So that's our first helper function. So let's actually give this a little bit of content here, right? So it formats the date timestamp. Okay, it formats it into a local string, into a local date string, right? That's what that is. Okay. And then, so it takes, so that's actually what this is actually doing, this function. So we're taking in a parameter of the timestamp. ISO is a standard, and we're following that standard. And then what we're going to return, okay, we're going to return a string based on a formatted date. And that's what we went through and did in this. So by the way, if we ever need to do this for any other place in our code, we could reference this function. And right now, and this is what's good to know about this, is these are called private, because these are only available within this module. But if we ever needed to, we might create a utilities module that we might put those in the future. Okay, so that's the first one. So now let's think about the next one we're going to do. Because if we come down here and look at our output, okay, household member size seems fine, but we already knew based on what I talked about before, home size is not quite working the way we'd want it to because of the whole is apartment thing. So what could we do? In this case, we could write another helper function, okay? And in this case, let's say const. Okay, so let's say format home size display equal to a function. Okay, well, now what are we going to take in? So we're going to take in home square footage and is apartment. Those are the two things we need in order to write some logic to, or in this case, an if statement. Okay, you often hear this control structure or a logic. So it's basically condition. If this condition exists, which is if is apartment, then we're going to run. And actually, remember what we did before. We actually don't even have to include this, but we are, because we're also going to do it else in a minute. So we're going to say return apt. So that is what gets returned. Else, what are we going to return? So else we're going to return, and in this case, let's do a string. Okay, so we have, and we'll just do a little bit of work here to the square footage in case somebody gives a very, precise square footage and we want to call to fixed to round it to no decimal places. We'll call it SQFT. Okay. Yeah, good. Right, so these are actually, no, this return right here. Okay, so here and here. So now where we call this one is right here, right? So now we want to call format home display, home size display. We want to pass it the home square footage, and we want to pass it entry dot is apartment. And then close that parentheses, because that's your, right, these are your arguments that become your parameters. And again, we didn't make these something different because there's really going to be nothing else we would use this. This is why this is a helper function, okay? All right, so let's give that a little bit of content. So in this case, formats home size for display in the table. Okay. It takes in as a parameter the square footage. It also takes in if it is an apartment. Okay, and it returns a string. Right there. Okay, cool. Now let's see this in action. Okay. Let's go here. Calculate. Let's see if I got it right. Yep, APT right here. Okay, so these others, because they were default, were no, and this now we know at least one of them worked correctly, which is awesome, right? Okay, so now we only have one more helper function we're going to write. Now this one's going to require a little bit of typing, so again I'm going to use my little trick to make my life a bit easier. Okay, so now think about this one. So in this case, the last two were from the radio buttons, right? We're going to end up fixing this as well. So the diet type and the food packaging were both from the radio button. So how do we convert what is used more at a coding level versus what somebody might want to see? And in this case, we could just use a switch value. And think about the fact that what we're doing here, we could use one function to handle both of these instead of having to write two separate. We could write two separate ones, but why? When, it's not a huge amount of switch statements we would need to do. So let's just go ahead and write it in one. So let's do const, and we'll do format radio values equal to a function, and we're going to take in a value. And you'll see what that value is in a second. And actually, you've already seen it. Now we're going to switch on the value. We're going to do our, okay. So now we're going to write several case statements for both the food diet and for the food packaging. So this is where I'm going to do case, and I'm going to do this, and you'll see why. I'm going to do return, and I'm going to do this, and then this. Now why am I doing this? Because I know I'm going to do several. So because I'm going to do several, I'll just do the first one. And actually the other thing I'm going to do is make my life a little bit easier. Instead of having to do so much typing, I could come over here and I could drop these down, because this is where those values were taken from, okay, for both of these. So I'm going to grab them. I'm going to end up grabbing them all, so why not have them all ready for me to go? So again, I'm using the little arrow to drop down the detail, right? So the value here, right? So if I was to copy this, I'd say, okay, in case it's this value, what do we want to return? And this is the one where we come up with something that is that, but somebody reading it, right, they'd be like, what, why is it written like this, right? People don't necessarily like to see it that way, or it will be confusing. Remember, we want the users to feel like, you know, they can understand the data that's in here. Oh, every time it did it. Okay, average. Okay. Oh, now before I do this one, matter of fact, I'll just do a couple, so maybe I don't have to average. Matter of fact, maybe I'll just go through and do them this way. Vegetarian. Okay. Oh, I see what they, yeah, that's right. On reload, that's what's happening. So I do vegan. So now I'm also, and that's what I was saying, I'm also going to do the ones for packaging. Okay, just to save myself. And why am I doing it this way? Probably because sometimes typing and talking doesn't work so well. Okay. Grab balanced. And then we'll come back and fill in what we want it to be on the return values. Again, just a little more human maybe. Okay. And some of them will just capitalize. That will be all we do. All right, so now we come back up here. I'm going to say average. Okay. I'm going to say, instead of all the way, and by the way this also you think about is how wide these columns become is the other reason we may be doing something like this. So for this, we might just do veg. Okay, and for this, because it would be vegan and possibly wild, we can do both. Okay, for this we do pre-pack. Okay, let's see, let me make sure I get rid of my space, because if I am really concerned about that, I definitely would want to make sure I have all my spaces got out of there as well. And then we'd do fresh. This one will probably be one of our longest. Okay. Local. Okay, now like with anything, we do want to do a default in case for some reason, again, we'll talk about form validation and how we handle that. Okay, but in this case we'll put, yeah, there might just return whatever was given to you if in the case that what you gave me wasn't matched up in here. And before we actually go look at it, let's actually say what this is, which is our helper. Okay, so this is our helper. To format the button values, we're taking in the value, which is the raw data for the button from the coding computer perspective, and then we're going to return a string. Okay, so let's go see. Let's go see if all that worked for us. Okay. I don't think it's gonna, you know what, let's just because I don't think it should, but I think also I'm just going to, you know, get a fresh set. Oh, duh, what did I forget? I'm like, why didn't it come through? Because I didn't call it. Okay, so format radio values, that would be why. Okay. And then the same would be true here. Format radio values. And again, our template string makes our life a bit nicer here because we can just call it while we're building out the string because of template strings. Good. Okay, so now it should have worked. Yeah. Good. Good. Nice, 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 nice. Okay, so what we've done here is we've just written a couple of functions, and they're little helper functions, private only to this module, to help us make things from the way we've saved the data in the object literal, in the array. So what we've done is made this just a little more user friendly, and I think you can see that if you look back on the way it was before. So now what we're going to do is move on to how do we handle having this show and display, and then doing handling this issue too that I talked about, where when we submit something we end up getting more submissions here, what looks like more submissions than there actually should have been. So we'll handle those next, but this will be your last one for this one. So helper functions, and let's see, all I had you do was how does local toDate string date string work, and why is it needed, and why is it called a helper function? I kind of gave you some of that today, but do a little more research. All right, I'll see you on 6.2.